So welcome everybody to join our first ever Ascend Data Friday. And as we mentioned, next time it could be a Tuesday. But just a quick intro, my name is Jove. I'm a solution architect at Ascend here. Previously, I worked as a solution architect at a company called Cubo, as well as Autonomy. And Andy.
Yeah, my name's Andy. I'm currently a PM here at Ascend. Have a pretty extensive engineering background, doing some data engineering work, some ML engineering work. Yeah, so I know Joe's going to be running through the main demo today. I'll be able to answer any questions that anyone has through Q&A. So feel free to use that as you'd like, and yeah, feel free to use the chat too.
Awesome. And just a quick intro for what we're going to do today. So Ascend Data Friday, the way we envision this, it's going to be a forum, a discussion by engineers and for engineers. And we're going to break it down to 4 sections. So the first one, we're going to talk about the data engineering challenge. We're going to talk about one specific challenge every single week. The second part, we're going to talk about the Ascend approach. And then we're going to do a live demo. And then the last round, the last part will be the what we call a fire round. Essentially, you guys can ask us any questions. Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Let's move on. By the way, let me take off my fake beard. This is me, by the way. Biggest discovery of the week is this snap camera. Cool, so the data engineering challenge we're going to talk about this week is imagine I have a multi-stage Spark pipeline that runs data through the following steps, right? So first, I standardize the schema from yellow cap and green cap so that I can union them together. These are all just like CSVs sitting on S3. It's our world-famous New York taxi cab dataset. So after I union them, I join them with weather data from the NOAA API. And after I join with the weather data, I can then filter out just the cap ride on rainy days. And lastly, I just want to aggregate the join and filter results first on hourly, then I'm going to aggregate it on daily as well. So all good. I mean, this is very simple, typical multi-stage Spark pipeline that can be accomplished in many different platforms.
Yeah, right. And the fact that it's multi-stage already probably means it's production ready. This doesn't mean that someone has just built this, because I'm sure the data engineers out there, we've all written like arbitrary Python scripts that have combined all 3 of these stages into a single like main function or something like that. But yeah, I think having the multi-stage is important for all production data pipelines and stuff like that.
Yeah, so far so good, right? So now the actual challenge kicks in. So what if I deploy some new standardization logic in my step 1 to production? And now imagine the rest of these steps have been running in production for, let's say, 3 days. Things change as they usually do. I need to roll back now to the old logic. So what should I do now? So so before we talk about this, we did a little bit study. We find 2 approaches, and we'll love to hear from the audience for any other approaches we didn't outline here as well. The first approach is obviously we could always DIY this, right? We're all data engineers. We can engineer anything. So a typical steps looks like this. So first, I will revert my code and get to the Git shard that actually has my old logic. And then secondly, I just need to manually identify and delete the data impacted by all 3 steps. And then rerun step 1 with the old logic, as well as like the other 2 steps, even though the logic did not change. But now step 1 produced different data as the input for step 2 and 3. So as a result, we just have to run step 2 and 3 again manually.
Right. And like, to take a step back, right? A lot of the times in which we have to make these sorts of changes, it could be anything from, maybe it's a given task for like a 2-week sprint or something, and you have like a lot of time to plan it out and actually, have an execution plan and everything. But if you're in the middle of an incident, right, I feel like as a data engineer, it becomes really, really difficult to gain confidence in the fact that, each of these reversion steps is actually going to work. It's going to be atomic and stuff like that, which personally I find to be like really, really annoying. Like, if you don't know the guarantee that if I just reran my pipeline again, that the results would actually be the same each time. So even though over here you're trying to delete specific data and identify where was impacted, I feel like a lot of the times people have just done the classic purge technique, right? Let's like purge everything underneath this prefix and just rerun it from the start.
Yeah, funny you mentioned that. I think I haven't done this too many times, but for the few times I did it myself, I just need to drink a lot of coffee before I do this, because like this second step, I just cannot make any mistakes, because otherwise I'm screwed, right?
Right.
But yeah, so like the second approach we saw, right, is recently there's a data lake approach where there's a time travel feature, right? So what that means is I technically speaking could do a CTAS. So I could create an external table with a select statement. I could create this staging step 1 table with a select statement from my current step 1 table. But then I use this timestamp as of like 3 days ago, just to get back my old data as if they were like 3 days ago. So once I do this, I could then change my table name from staging step 1 to step 1, so that my step 1 table in production has the data from 3 days ago, right? So, but after I do this, I still need to do like the same thing for step 2 and 3, just to revert the data for those 2 steps as well. And then after everything's said and done, I also need to run the new data, run the pipeline again, to basically process data from the past 3 days through all 3 steps, now that I reverted the logic in step 1. And then from a version control perspective, I mean, actually we will still have the same step to revert my code to the Git shard that has the old logic. But then like all these like create staging table, I think these are just going to be one-off that I'm going to run just to recover the data using this approach. I don't know, Andy, if you have done this before, if you want to comment something about
I
this
haven't
approach
used like Delta Lake specifically, but the sort of running subsequent query like approach is definitely really painful, especially when you want to revert it to specifically like 4 or 5 days back in time. We've had training pipelines at my last company that would take days, or sometimes like a week to run, right? So if you made a typo in like one of 10 queries and you only realized it after all your data came back and it was 30 days back instead of 3 days back, then you're going to wait another week just to do that. And a lot of the times this data either doesn't get staged, saved at different stages, and that just makes this all super annoying.
Yeah, so I think the other thing that could potentially be challenging is I actually didn't even consider like partition tables and all these scenarios, because this select star query could potentially be huge, right? Because I'm actually selecting everything. Yeah. So why we want to talk about the ascent approach is because like these 2 approaches we have seen so far doesn't seem that easy yet, and it just seems like a lot of work, especially when I do the cascading rollback, right, on this type of multi-stage Spark pipeline. And what we believe is easy and cheap rollbacks enables faster iteration, so that as a data engineer, I don't need to worry about like, is my code deployed to production and it breaks the production so bad to a point that I basically burn 2 weeks time of everybody to just do the rollback, right? So as a data engineer, I could basically release more frequently without the concern that I get blamed and then I got to spend 2 weeks of my time reverting.
Right. Yeah, and to take a step back, right? Like as a data engineer, I feel like a lot of times changes that we would make are, it's very hard to get confidence in it. But one thing that Spark introduced is it made like the whole data engineering framework very similar to the software engineering framework, but without any sort of way to version control data infrastructure. It's almost as if the only state that you care about your data pipelines is the now, and you're not even thinking about, what was it like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and no way if you're thinking about on the order of months or years.
Yeah, so I think we're still in the early phase. I mean, speaking to that, we're still in the early phase when it comes to version data. I think lots of different companies have different approaches. But But yeah, I mean, definitely version data is not as mature as version control code, from at least what I have seen so far.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, let's introduce the ascent approach then for our next section. So to do cascading, rollback, and ascent, there are 3 steps. The first one, basically same thing. I gotta revert my code to the Git shard. It has my old logic. And the second step is basically I need to deploy this to production so that ascent could kick off the Spark jobs to actually do the data processing. And the last step is actually, yeah, just for me to wait. It's my favorite step of the day. I enjoy this a lot. At this time, maybe I'll still get a coffee, but ask me in 2 hours, I'm get a beer instead. But what happened behind the scene though, on the third step is Ascent's DataAware technology will now recognize the old logic and essentially reuse the old data set right away without reprocessing any of the old data. And if there's any new data from the past 3 days that we have not processed with the old logic yet, Ascent will also automatically kick off Spark jobs to process these. Yeah, so next we're actually just gonna head right into a demo on how these 3 steps gonna work. Probably not gonna demo the last one because I actually don't have a fridge in this room yet, but we'll do that later.
Yeah. It's gonna be a fun demo, right? Yeah, like I think that we built this feature off of first asking what our customers wanted, right? Like how would you do a dev staging prod life cycle for your data pipeline? No one really had like a good answer for that besides, sometimes I hit a button and then I pray. But for us, right, we realized that, one lucky part about our framework is that we sort of ask you, what do you want your final state of data to look like rather than, what are the actual specific types of adjustments you want to make to the data to get to that point. But we're able to version control all of that, which is cool. And we built this thinking about what would you actually stick in a GitHub that would be relevant.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we always just want to version control the code, right? We never want to version control any data. Yeah, actually let's just head into the demo and let me quickly show you guys how this works. So let me exit out of this. So now we're back with the Ascent system. So this is a typical data flow, how it looks like in Ascent. So on just a quick orientation of what you guys are looking at. So on the far right, on the far left, these are the data sources. So we have the yellow cap and green cap data coming from S3 as CSV files. And then we also have weather data coming from the NOAA weather API. So my step 1 is basically doing some standardization. So the yellow cap and green cap data has like different schemas. So in order for me to union them, I need to kind of standardize the schema first. And this is actually the part I'm going to change. So imagine like under the cap type, right now I have Y, just because some people say, hey, we just want to label the green cap and yellow cap data after the standardization. We want to use Y to annotate the yellow cap. But what we used to have is yellow. But someone thinks yellow is like too long, so just shorten it to Y. So we deploy this change in production already. And as you can see, I mean, this data set is in step 1, and my step 2 and 3 have already completed running. So in my step 2, I basically do the joining the weather data set and the all caps data, and then step 3 is the aggregation, as we talked about earlier. But now my problem is like, hey, if I want to revert this back to yellow, how is that going to work, right? So from a code perspective, let me show you guys the code we have for this. So first of all, actually, these are all the SQL queries throughout the multiple steps we have. So let's take a look at the SQL query for my yellow cap. So it has, Y and the cap type, right? So now let me just reverse. So I know this one of my previous commits actually has yellow in my cap type query. So I just did a git checkout of another older commit. So let me check on this query again. So now this has yellow, right, in the SQL. So this is essentially step one. I reverted the code. So now I get back the code that has yellow. So step number two, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to deploy this into Ascend. So I basically run an Ascend apply command from the Ascend SDK to say, hey, I'm going to deploy this with all my components from NYC Taxi. So when I do the deploy, so this is going to go, and let me come back to Ascend and take a look at this again. So it got reverted back to yellow. But everything still says up to date, and that's because we already computed the results for yellow before. So that's the part where we do not need to reprocess anything. So technically speaking, I'm done. I reverted this. So I did the first two steps. But you may ask, like, hey, you know, for any new data that came in after I changed this to Y, now I reverted back to yellow. So those new data actually have not been processed with yellow yet, right? So my green cap incremental actually will have new data comes in. So all I need to do is to just wait for my green cap incremental to refresh. So as the green cap incremental to pick up new data, so we will see some of these will get in the running stage because there's new data we haven't processed before, but it's still very fast because this is done incrementally and we don't need to reprocess all the old data from way before this change was introduced. So that's essentially these couple steps. Yeah, anything else to add here?
Yeah. I mean, I think the cool part here is that, you know, it automatically came back up to date, right? Which honestly looks a little hand wavy from a UI perspective. But yeah, I mean, I think the power here is that we're able to, you know, really version control a lot of powerful transformation code, right? And then as we adjust that, it's super easy to connect some sort of rollback like this to your own, you know, deployment pipeline. Like we've seen this connect to, you know, Circle CI, something like Jenkins. And, you know, that just makes like being an on-call as a data engineer, honestly, just super easy, right? Like having that automated, like one-click rollback in the case that you see something, you know, break or something like that. And, you know, you're up at 2 a.m. and you don't have to wait until 5 a.m. for the data to reprocess, right? Because, you know, if you have that previous data already there, then, you know, you could revert to a previous state for all downstream, you know, transforms very, very easily.
Cool. So with that, we can get into our next section, which is the fire round. So this is the part where we're gonna take questions.
Right. So it looks like we have one question here that we can answer live. So far in the Q&A, feel free to drop any more in there if you'd like. We have someone ask, how does Ascend know that there's new data that hasn't been processed?
Right. Yeah, so let me actually step back to the UI over here. So the green cap incremental is where we describe where the data is for this particular reconnector. So if I toggle over to the fragment tab quickly, we actually keep track of every single file that match that pattern prefix, right? So my pattern prefix defined as demo data, demo underscore data, nyc text, incremental /star. And then flip over here. So all this file has like a UID as the file name, but they basically match the star description. So we pick them up. And we also create a fingerprint for every single file that we picked up from this location. So in S3, we actually remembers the E tag, right? So anytime there's a new file that comes in that we have never seen before, or anytime there's an existing file we have seen before, but now it has a new E tag, we actually will automatically reprocess just that, as well as any of the downstream that got impacted because of that new file.
Cool. Yeah, right. So that's honestly what helps us, be able to stage data in between every single transform. Okay, so one more question is, I see you are reading data from S3, but can I ingest from other sources?
Yeah, so we actually can ingest from anywhere, and we can work with different file formats as well. So in terms of the data repository, I mean, we have customers have us deploy working with data from FTP, from databases, data warehouse, and then working with PDF and Excels, or even proprietary binary formats that they hosted on S3. Yeah, so all of those are possible.
Okay, cool. I think that is it for now. Oh, one more question just came in asking, if I wanted to play around with this SDK and CLI, how do I install it onto my local machine?
Oh, yep, good question. So I think in the window I just showed, I did this ascend apply command. So this is this comes with our SDK, which is also available publicly at this location, ascend.io SDK-Python. So I could install basically with a pip install command, and then after I do that, I could do ascend apply. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, and that should give you the SDK and CLI. Perfect. I think those are all the questions we have for now. Yeah, it looks like we are running close to the end. I'd just like to, thank everyone for joining today. This is definitely our first pass at having a Data Friday, or just, I guess, Data Weekday for now. Hopefully everybody is staying well quarantined and sufficiently socially distanced. So we chose this topic because, we were feeling really passionate about it, being able to help some of our customers implement it. And yeah, so if you have any, ideas for stuff you'd like to cover relating to potential problems you're facing for your data projects, feel free to drop us an email here, Jove at ascend.io, and me at Andy at ascend.io. And yeah, if you'd also like to just continue discussions around, what are best practices for CI/CD for a data pipeline, we'd love to continue that there.
Thanks a lot, Andy. And now I'm gonna go back to playing with Snap Camera. And I spend so much time with my dog now at home, so I feel like I become my dog myself almost. All right, awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.